Universal has a new monster, and they're not happy about it. That plus reported casualties in the streaming wars and a lot more on today's episode of the Geek Watch podcast.
This is the Geek Watch podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 97 of the Geek Watch podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
So we've got some movie news to talk about. There is a trailer or two we can talk about. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of news about different streaming services and shows, what's coming out, what possibly might not be coming out. But before we get to that, we do have an in memorial today. This happened about a week and a half ago, but it's now hitting the news at this point. But Brice Armstrong passed away at 83. Most people know him from his voiceover work in anime. He's done a bunch of different animes. What most people will know him for, especially if you were a big fan of Toonami back in the early 2000s, he did voices for Dragon Ball Z, the original series. Okay. He was Captain Ginyu, he was Lord Slug, and he was more notably he was the narrator.
Okay.
So after you'd basically watched about an hour of Dragon Ball Z where the two people screamed at each other and hadn't thrown a punch yet,
right? And
then you got his narration at the end.
It said they have been standing here, or that sounds a little more like Speed Racer.
Yeah,
I can't do it good.
Yeah, but that's Brice. So that was Brice Armstrong, and he passed away last week, and of course we're just finding out about it now. So I did want to mention that today on the podcast.
Oh, J.R.R. Tolkien's son.
Oh,
yeah, he passed away.
Oh, yes, I had forgotten about that. Yes, he did pass away, didn't he? Yes. So yeah, we'll definitely.
And he was up there, man. He was like 98, something like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so yeah, we should definitely mention that as well. Mandalorian's already got their season 2 confirmed, but everything else, well, I won't say everything else, but there's a lot of stuff up in the air at this point. Amazon passed on the Dark Tower series. We've been talking about that.
Really?
Yep, they're not.
Oh.
The biggest problem they ran into is they've got a Wheel of Time series coming out. They've got I think they're doing a Game of Thrones spinoff also.
Amazon?
Or not Amazon. No, I'm sorry.
HBO?
Well, Amazon's doing a what? It's not Game of Thrones. What? Is it a Lord of the Rings? I think.
Oh wow.
They're doing.
I haven't heard about this. Well,
yeah,
that's neat. Were they doing like the Silmarillion? I don't know what else.
Yeah,
is
maybe
left.
so. I was trying to remember, but the thing about it is the production value of these two shows are pretty high, and apparently the production value of the Dark Tower not so much. So they said it doesn't quite reach the level of quality that we've been putting out so far, and so they just basically took a pass. Now, my understanding is the pilot for Dark Tower is being shopped around some other places, so it may show up somewhere. But,
Dune, are they the ones doing Dune?
Oh, you're talking about the well, I'm trying to think. I know somebody's doing a Dune TV, and it might be Amazon.
Maybe that's where,
but
if you're going to budget out. And,
because I know, I know we're getting a movie here. So.
And then the Sisterhood, the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood.
Yeah.
Series.
Amazon, the stuff they put out is pretty high quality. So apparently, whoever did the pilot, they just looked at it and they're like,
wow.
No, sorry. Which is just a shame, but of course a lot of people have been saying that this wave of Stephen King stuff we've been getting recently, it's starting to drop off at this point, because of course Dr. Sleep, which I thought was a really good movie, and people who saw it thought it was a really good movie, but it didn't do so well.
Yeah.
So people are starting to wonder if...
Then we got the tall grass and...
yeah. So I get, as of right now, we'll have to wait to see what happens with Dark Tower, but... HBO's not doing a season 2 of Watchmen. They've already announced that as well. Damon Lindelof, who produced the first one, he was like, I'm just not really interested in doing a second season. And so HBO was like, well, if you're not interested in it, well, we're not really interested in trying to find somebody who is.
Wasn't that kind of the plan to begin with, to do a self-contained story and not,
Well, that was the plan for sure, that they wanted that season to be self-contained. So if there wasn't a season 2, that it wasn't going to really hurt anything. And I think that's a good, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Obviously, if they'd had a huge cliffhanger at the end of Watchmen, it would kind of suck at this point. You're like, well, we're never going to know. So I think it's a good, again, I think and that may be part of the reason why Damon Lindelof didn't want to, he wanted to have that season to be self-contained because he knew, I'm going to do one season of this and that's about all I'm interested in. So
you haven't watched it yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so you don't know that there was a giant cliffhanger at the end.
Oh, was there? Was there really? Oh, good Lord. That's
well,
bad.
To me, it's not the kind of cliffhanger that bugs you. I think it's the cliffhanger it's the lady or the tiger. It's something that you decide, or what the spinning top and what was the Inception. The spinning top and Inception, it's kind of what you decide, what you feel like goes next, kind of thing. So, that's where I went with it. It didn't piss me off like it's pissed off other people.
Well, I know that, of course, when they did Sherlock, the first season of Sherlock, of course, it ended on, Sherlock and Watson basically looked like they're about ready to get shot to death,
Blown up.
Yeah. Lots of the laser tracking, just a lot of crazy stuff at that point. And I figured that was just, Stephen Moffat's way of going, okay, you might not renew this, but I dare you. I dare you not to renew it. Yes, I will eventually get to Watchmen. Right now, I'm just trying to get caught up on movies now that the season, the Oscar season is upon us. It's opened up.
Yeah.
So now Jojo Rabbit is back and I'm planning on catching that in the next few days. I did get to see Parasite, which was the Korean film.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It's a crazy little con artist crime drama with this kind of, like I said, messed up family.
Okay.
Who managed to con this rich family into basically hiring them on to do things for them, and they're making a good amount of money doing it. As of course it's karma catching up with you, that whole kind of thing, because it's like they see a good thing and they just assume they're the only ones who knew about it. I'll leave it there. I mean, you're best off not knowing anything about this movie going into it, but it's messed up. It's really messed up. There was toward the end the place where I went to see it, there's a micro theater in Charleston, and it was packed. There wasn't an empty seat.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there's this one scene at the end where everything just goes to hell in a handbasket, and the lady who was sitting next to me put her head down and just covered her eyes and her ears. She knew what was coming at that point. She's like, I can't watch this. So she covered her ears, closed her eyes, and just put her head down and just.
So was it subbed or dubbed?
It was subbed.
Okay.
I'm not the biggest fan of dubbing for sure. It was. And I know they're planning on doing a television series based off of it. It's not being done by the director, but I think the director's involved in it, and it's going to expand upon this family and stuff they were into and all that stuff. But
interesting.
A lot of people were worried, me included, that they were just going to make an American version of this because they thought, well, these are Americans, so
like Old Boy or
yeah. And which I've never been a fan of, especially when you've done it right the first time.
They're doing that Last Train to Busan. They're
doing a sequel to it.
Oh, see, they're doing it for over there, not because I'd heard doing an American version of it. I don't know if it was Last Train to Chicago or whatever.
That's the thing. It's like as Americans, you hate to be thought of as people who are uncultured or whatever, and then you go and it's like, well, you take somebody's good movie and you're like, well, let's put white people in it so it matters. It's like, oh, no, don't do that. Yeah, like I said, it's especially when it's they've already done it extremely well, and Parasite is definitely that.
Okay.
And of course, I see why it got a best movie nod, because it's really, really good.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's going to get the Oscar for it, but I would definitely say that it's up for also best foreign film, and I'm pretty sure it's going to get it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get back to now that we've stepped off into this tangent. We'll get back and talk a little bit about some of the streaming service stuff, because we've been talking about the stuff that that is true, and then of course we got to talk about rumor, because there's so much, like I said, news going on, and there's so much rumor and speculation going on that we, maybe get a chance to clear up a little something, because I've been hearing all these rumors about how LucasFilm had canceled the OBI-WAN TV series. There'd been all this stuff going on in press. It's like there was problems between Ewan McGregor and issues that he was having with movies he was shooting, and there was conflicts, and that he was having issues with the with the director, writer, and there was all that talk. And then it was like, well, okay, they're still planning on doing it, but there may be some delays. And the last that I heard about it was representatives of McGregor basically come out and said, no, all this is garbage. None of it is true. None of it, everybody is happy with everybody. And it's going to come out on time, and everything is on track. Which I understand there'll be some people out there going, oh, this sounds like a conspiracy. This can't possibly, they're trying to cover it up. They're trying to cover it up. So, well, if it comes out on time and everybody seems to be happy, then I suppose then this was all a rumor. So
Okay.
The other thing that I heard, which just came out of nowhere, and when I first heard it, I'm like, I hope this isn't true, because, but they were saying that HAWKEYE was going to be canceled, the HAWKEYE TV.
Huh. Okay.
And, the thing about it was, because I know Jeremy Renner forever was saying that he always wanted to do a HAWKEYE TV show like they did on Netflix. He wanted, because, of course, that would give him a chance to expand his character.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, then you had that opportunity come out, and it's like, oh, I heard rumors they were having to delay the production, and some it was on hiatus indefinitely and all that, and apparently none of that was true at all either. So, but yeah, so all that seems to be garbage. So I guess we'll get HAWKEYE. So again,
So we get Obi-Wan, we get HAWKEYE.
We will get that. I do have to mention is a little bit of a new topic, but I thought this was interesting. Seth MacFarlane just signed a $200 million deal with NBC Universal to develop shows for their streaming service.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So no panic, guy. Nothing's happening to the Orville or to American Dad or Family Guy. He's still contracted to do those shows. He's still going to be doing them. He's basically got a development deal with NBC Universal, and apparently he talked to a bunch of streaming services. He talked to Apple, and he talked to Disney, and NBC Universal ponied up the big money. They gave him $200 million. So, the thing about it is, of course, a lot of the stuff that he does, Orville has kind of stepped away from it, but his humor has been more adult. I think the Orville's shown that he can play in other sandboxes beside that, and that might have been what made him attractive to NBC for their streaming service. But yeah, that's a nice chunk of change.
Yeah.
Of course, the thing is, I'm wondering where Universal's going to get the money to pay for it, because, well, I got to bring it up. Their movie Dolittle's not doing so well.
Yeah. See, I hadn't even known that Dr. Dolittle had come out yet.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was out yet.
Well, that's another problem that they have, I guess. Well,
It looked so good.
yeah, well, here's the thing about it. Of course, the first Dr. Dolittle had Rex Harrison in it. It was made in 1967, so I was alive, but not old enough to really remember it. I remember seeing it on TV.
Right.
But it tanked at the box office too, but then it turned around and won an Oscar. So...
Okay.
Because the studio really levied, they campaigned hard for that movie. But but it tanked. It tanked originally. But then again, how many classic great movies have tanked in the box office? Bunches of them.
Right.
So, but yeah, this remake. Here's the thing about it. It didn't just tank. It tanked spectacularly.
Did it go up against anything? What was the
Bad Boys Forever?
Okay.
So yeah, but I think the biggest issue with it, I guess it just didn't really have an audience. They thought, the thing about it is, Robert Downey Jr.
Right, star power.
He definitely has star power, and it's not just in Marvel movies. Here's the thing about it is, when I first saw the trailer, I thought it was like a Disney film. I thought Disney was putting it out. Which I have a feeling Universal, they did that on purpose. I think they deliberately wanted people to think, oh, this is a Disney film. It's got Robert Downey Jr. in it. Come see it. But they didn't. In fact, they're hoping that the overseas money will basically help them.
Waterworld.
They're hoping and helping recoup it. But they're saying that at this point, this film might lose $100 million. There are people saying that. Right now, this movie is a bigger flop and has lost more money than Cats has at this point.
It's a bad year for CGI animals.
Yeah,
which I gotta say,
well. That makes me worry for Peter Rabbit too. But the thing about it is, what makes that even worse. As far as the fact that Universal is losing $100 million on Dolittle, or could, and that it's worse than Cats, is, of course, Universal put out Cats. I'm like, they are 2 in a row for just absolutely just
Who did the Eddie Murphy Dolittle back in the late 90s, 2000s?
I'm wondering. I'm thinking that might have been Universal.
Was it?
Well,
that had Leah behind it, so they got a sequel.
Exactly. There you go. But I'd forgotten about the Eddie Murphy remake of that. Yeah, that's true. But I feel bad for Universal, because they've had not just 2 flops in a row, but colossal, massive flops.
Wow.
So I don't know. This is not good. I don't know. Now they owe Seth MacFarlane about $200 million.
Yeah, there's a lot riding on that pony. They're laying some bets down, but he can put out good content. Seth MacFarlane, he's very talented. He's not just voice actor, but writer and songwriter, and he could. I'm still waiting on his Broadway musical. I don't know what it'll be. Hopefully not A Million Ways to Die in the West. That was.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But everyone's got one of those. So.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think. Well, since you bring up that movie, I think the biggest problem with it was definitely Seth MacFarlane trying to basically monetize what he was known for at the time. That whole idea of, of course, with Family Guy and being edgy and all that. And it's like, well, that's what they expect from me. So let me give them a lot more of that. Of course, I'm not a mind reader, so mostly I'm not a mind reader, but, I don't know if that was what was going on into his head, but, everything just kind of fell flat for the whole, in that movie. I was not a fan at all, for sure. But at the same time, it was like, I felt like, I don't know if I'm the audience for this movie, but at the same time, I didn't know who was. Mm-hmm. But like I said, you see things like the Orville, and you're like, oh, he's going to do a raunchy Star Trek, but he didn't. Mm-mm. And so, I think like we said before, I think that's what made him really appealing to NBC, because they're like, well, this guy can do, he's more than just this one trick pony, for sure.
Yeah, he was just waiting for his EGOT, same as the South Park boys.
Yeah, Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Yeah, they're waiting. What do they have left to do? They've got their Oscar, they got their Tony, they got their Emmy. So Grammy, they need a Grammy left.
I think so.
To round it out. So
yep, that's basically it. So I wanted to ask you, today, and I put this in my notes because I know you've seen this and I haven't yet, but I've seen the memes. Let's talk The Witcher.
The Witcher, yay.
So yeah, I was a little leery about it because I was again, it's like they're taking a comic book / video game and they're making they're going to be making the series out of it, which it could be really good or it could be really bad. Like I said, I've seen a bunch of the memes on this.
Yeah,
thing,
it's very meme worthy.
Yeah. So you've seen it.
Yes.
And the season's over, as I understand. So what'd you think of it?
I really liked it. Okay. I can see that it's not everyone's cup of tea. I had trouble with it because the timeline is crazy. What you think you're watching, you have to listen for these very subtle clues that tell you when in the timeline you are. And then now Netflix has actually put out an interactive map with a timeline, and you can click on the events and the places and what happened on these events. So, that's very helpful. And so I had to watch like the first 3 episodes like over and over again, like watch episode 1, then go back and watch episode 1 again, and then watch episode 2, watch episode 2 again, and do that a couple of times for me. But, I hadn't read the books, I hadn't played the video game, so, I went into it completely blind. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. If, you like Lord of the Rings, if you like your high fantasy like that, it's great. They follow rules of magic, which is always great. I like because so many times you have these characters that are just too powerful and they could just do anything. And, in this, magic has a price and you have to pay that price. And I enjoy that aspect of it. Really good characters. And yeah, definitely meme worthy. And like you haven't even seen it, but I'm sure you can sing the song.
Well, I mean, technically, no. But I've heard about the song has definitely been memed a lot for sure.
And toss a coin to your Witcher. And I love the memes too. And but I have trouble posting things like on Facebook because as a joke, I posted how many quarters do you think I can get if I cosplayed Witcher? And then the next morning, my mom said, "Do you need quarters for parking?" And it was so adorable. I love my mom so much. She does stuff like that. And I recommend, especially you like your high fantasy stuff, don't be afraid to go back and watch it once or twice. And if you just watch the first episode through and you're thinking, oh, I can't get into this, give it another shot. And, and there are, like I said, there are very subtle clues to each scene where you are in the timeline. Yeah. So, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, usually if you have issues with transitions, that can be a real problem in a TV show. And, especially if you're very ADD. Obviously this is a type of TV show. It's not like you're going to have it playing in the background and you're doing something else because you're gonna lose track of where you are for sure. I have to tell you, just in a just at a first blush, if somebody told me in a TV show, it's like, yeah, the transitions are really subtle. You have to really pay attention, or you're very likely going to miss them. And they put out a guide to let you know where everything is in the timeline. At first blush, I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good at all. It's just like when the first Dune movie came out.
Yep.
And they wanted to put out a glossary for terms to give to the people in the movie theater, and I'm like,
yep.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's dark, so how are you going to read it? First of all, but the fact they're going to give you a dictionary so you understand the movie, that may not be your best bet. But like I said, at first blush, this hearing that, well, the timeline's a little hard to follow is like, oh, that's like, bad. But
the timeline is hard to follow, but the story isn't. I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's not going to ruin it for you. I know that doesn't sound that sounds crazy, but watching this story unfold and then realizing that, oh, this actually happened, 100 years before this happened, doesn't mess up the story for you.
Yeah.
And you just realize, no, okay, so that wasn't as long ago as I thought it was, or this was longer ago than I thought it was, or she was born before he was, kind of thing. It doesn't ruin the story. It doesn't mess with you, but I'm a stickler and I want to know when things happen.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, there's one scene where he's talking about a princess that he saved, and then he has to save another princess. And then you find out, oh, this was the princess, that was her. And, it's kind of heartbreaking because realizing that that's who he's talking about and how long ago that happened and how it's still affecting him.
Oh, I see.
So it really doesn't hurt the confusion of the timeline. It doesn't hurt the story. It's just more of like you have these revelations of, well, okay, this happened then.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So basically, for, I guess, as a narrative drive, it's not, they're being obtuse on purpose because they want you to think one thing and then they reveal it.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see that. Mm-hmm.
Is that okay?
Yep.
That's what it sounds like you're saying. And
Mm-hmm.
if they're doing it, like I said, if they're doing that as a narrative device,
Mm-hmm.
I get that. I mean, obviously, I'm, as a writer, as somebody who enjoys art, I don't feel like you have to have a linear story. I mean, one of my favorite movies is Memento.
Memento, yeah, that's
the
biggest
complete opposite of a linear story because
Yes.
they literally tell it backwards.
right. And okay, one thing, and it's not really spoilery, but what the one that makes me happen, you see one scene and you hear this girl talk about a queen, and she said, "You were my age when you fought this battle." Well, in the very next scene, a woman says, "Well, this queen is only 13 and she just won her first battle." That's what makes you get it. And that's when you realize, we're like 30 years ago. And so that's the kind of thing. It doesn't hurt, the story that's going on. So,
yeah, you just have to pay attention.
yes. Uh-huh.
I got you.
And, for someone with ADHD, to watch it through a few times and
It's like, oh, okay, I just
okay,
missed
now I get it.
I
Yes.
get it. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I do have that set up to watch. So I mean,
Awesome.
I need to catch up with that one, and of course, I haven't seen any of Watchmen yet, but I definitely have that. I mean, eventually, I'll get
I'll get around to these, and especially when you realize I'm in the present, and then you get really mad. You're like, why is that guy still alive? Why hasn't he killed him yet? And so I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that.
Oh, okay, for sure. Okay, well, of course, this wouldn't be the Geek Watch podcast in January if we weren't talking about Doctor Who. So let's talk a little bit of Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
So, and we got a good amount of Doctor Who news to talk about today, because first of all, the one thing that surprised me, and this just came out just a few hours ago, is that we did get a new mid-season Doctor Who trailer.
Awesome. No. Yeah. Oh, cool.
So, just in case you were wondering, is the rest of the season going to start getting progressively dark? Yes, it is. Yep. They hinted it a little bit in the first trailer, but they're really dipping into things are going to go bad. I mean, you have people in the TARDIS now questioning how long is this going to go on? We can't possibly be doing this forever. And of course, the Doctor's saying, I don't get to win all the time. And of course, we get that call back to the Master. Everything you is a lie.
It's a lie, yeah.
So,
and we see some Jadoon in there, which could mean the Shadow Proclamation is in on something.
Well, I mean, we'll find out next week because that's the episode with the Jadoon. So, but we'll talk about the episode this week, the episode 4, with the creative title Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror.
I loved it.
So yeah, you enjoyed that film. You enjoyed that one. Yeah, I did, and I enjoyed it as well. There was a lot of interesting things in there. Of course, you get that the Tesla Edison.
Yes, that was great.
Although here's the thing, though, one thing that I would have liked to have seen them do.
Popsy the elephant?
No. No, that's not even funny. But I can't even believe you'd even bring that up.
Come on, if you're hearing Tesla Edison, you're going to bring up Popsy the elephant.
Yeah.
Well, Doctor Who did not, so good for them.
Well, there you go. Well, but the thing about it was there was one point in Edison's history where his entire factory burned down. Now, with the story that they were telling with the tower and everything else, they might have had to do a little bit of a license, a poetic license to bring in the factory fire into the story. But I thought that might have been interesting, especially Yeah, because Edison's factory burned down to the ground.
Right, that would have been great, like the Agatha Christie episode where she, had a fugue state and she didn't remember what had gone on, and they brought that into it.
Yeah,
that would have been a good plot device,
especially if the villains of the piece had something to do with it. Mm-hmm. They wind up killing a lot of his men. If they had burned the factory down, I mean, you bring that kind of bit of history in. I was surprised that they didn't, to be honest. The other thing that surprised me about the episode, because we've been talking about this, of course, the villains were the Skithra.
I was about to say Sleaze Stack. I promise I was about to say Sleaze Stack. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but of course we've been talking about that because we saw them. We saw them in the trailers, and it's like, wow, that reminds me of something. And I was sure that they were going to be like a cousin race, But the thing about it was no mention at all.
The Arachnos,
no mention at all about the Arachnos, and I was sure they were going to, especially with Angelia Mohindra. Let me say her last name correctly. With her, the way she played the queen was very much like the Arachnos queen. It was it. I mean, like I said, they could have literally been sisters in that situation. And I mean, the thing about it is, it was so close. I wouldn't have thought that would have been an accident. You know what I mean? I would have thought they had done that on purpose, and they've done that before.
Yeah.
With races that are similar.
The Slovene and the Zorbalov.
Yeah.
From Raxcorca Phalabatorius and Plum. And
the Minotaur. That was a cousin race to the Naimon, which you're connecting old Who to new Who in that situation. But I mean, I expected there to be some sort of reference to the Arachnos. Right. Of course, the Arachnos, a race that was so threatening in the universe that the Time Lords felt like they had to kill them off. And there's a handful of races where the Time Lords, supposedly the nice, peaceful, we just watch type of situation.
Prime directive.
Yeah, they're prime directive, and yet there were races, like the Arachnos or the Fendal, where they felt like they had to interfere.
Unless we don't like them.
Unless we don't like them and they're a problem, then we got to do something about it. But, the thing about it is, like I said, it really surprised me, how similar those two races are, that the Arachnos got no mention at all, which I thought was kind of weird, because I thought that they were doing that on purpose. It's just so close. It was just so close. But, maybe there'll be some mention of them later, because, I mean, it looks like the ship teleported away at the last minute before they were destroyed. But the thing about it is, we've been talking about how the Doctor's starting to get dark again. She was like, I gave you a chance, and she was planning on destroying that ship. Right.
The only thing I can think is that they don't know that they are a part of that they are related to the Arachnos, because the Arachnos were so dangerous, but these guys, they're just, like scavengers, like carrion birds, picking off everything, and they can't do anything for themselves, sort of. And maybe that they were just so disgusting towards the Arachnos that they kind of cut all ties with them. I'm not sure, but
well, the Arachnos, they were a very old race, and I mean they were destroyed pretty much before the creation of the Earth. But the thing about it, to me, as a storyteller, I would think, when you have a threat as you've already established, as big as the Arachnos, and you have these characters that are kind of scavenger, if they have the potential of being as dangerous as the Arachnos, you have to wonder who messed with them, where they're having to.
They don't realize how powerful they are,
or somebody like perhaps the Time Lords got involved and knocked them down enough pegs that they wound up being scavengers. Just something that develops the story.
Yeah.
Like I said, but the thing is, you can't, like I said, you can't, whether they intended there to be a link there or not. I mean, you can't look at the Skithra Queen and not see Queen of the Arachnos. Right. You just can't. I mean, it's almost played exactly the same. It's so, but, I mean, like I said, I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed a lot of even though, of course, the history was played a little bit fast and loose, obviously. But bringing Tesla into it, But it does also show as well that the fact that it's like Tesla, you mean like the car?
Yeah.
It's like, do you know where the name came from? You know?
Yeah,
So-
I was expecting. I guess I feel like everyone should know who Tesla is. I was like, come on, the Tesla coil. That's.
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing you played with in school to make your hair stand up, and
Right.
so, like, shouldn't you know that? But
Oh, yeah. Well, and the other thing, too, is one of the things, and this is what I find interesting about this episode. I want your opinion on this. Is a lot of people have looked at this as a parable as far as being creative as compared to being a business person.
Okay.
And, and the question of that being is the moral of this story, what is better? Is it better to be creative or is it better to be a business person? And I look at that story and I'm like, well, it really depends on how you look at it. Because the thing about it is it's like, Tesla was the creative one, but people don't remember him. Edison, he was the money guy, but people remember him. So is being an inventive genius who's not that good at business a better thing, honestly? You can see that either way. And I don't know if the writing was intended to be that, to basically leave it up to the viewer to kind of decide that for themselves, or, if they did, I think that's really creative. I think that's a really interesting way of telling the story. But then again, I might also be reading more into the story than the screenwriter put in there. I've been guilty of that a lot of times. And very often, very much like the English teacher who talks about the symbolism in a story, what did the blue curtains mean? When the author would tell you, well, it meant the curtains were blue, So like I said, I might be reading something more into the story than, like I said, the screenwriter had intended it for there to be in there. But I'm just going to stick with it. I'm just going to pretend like that was done on purpose. And I'm going to say that was brilliant. Brilliant in the way that you didn't have to necessarily draw a line one way or the other, that you could show both sides of it.
Right.
And that's why I was a little bit disappointed, even like I said, even though it would have been having to mess around with the timeline a little bit, why we didn't have that moment where the factory burns down. I think that would have brought more dimension into the Edison character for sure.
Oh, yeah. Instead of just making him kind of be like I guess Lex Luthor, sort of, and they sort of talk about him that way and say, oh, you're just getting everyone else's ideas, sort of thing. And when it comes to the point of, creative versus business, you have to have that balance because both are absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Without the creative mind, there's nothing for the business people to market without, and then without being able to market to the consumer, there's nothing for the creative person they don't have an audience.
Right.
So it's important to have both those types of minds. And then if you mix them, the wrong way, then you get Andy Warhol.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get the factory where he did all his art.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good point. But yeah, there's the line about show business. The second half of show business is business, and as a, creative type, sometimes we can shy away from the business side of things. We're like, you want to think about following your creative spirit and not concerned about money, and that sort of thing. So, it can be very easy when you're a creative type to basically ignore the whole business side of things.
I mean, watch Shark Tank or Dragon's Den if you're in Europe. It's in Australia. It's Shark Tank as well. I mean, you've got these business people, and then a lot of times you have a creative person trying to offer this product to business people, and then they explain to them, this is why we have to have this a certain way. And one of the big things was, well, we don't want to charge that much for it because of the people buying it. And then the business people say, well, then how are you going to pay your employees? Yeah. So you have to have that mind.
Yeah. Well, the best example of that in this story is when Tesla is talking to these investors, wanting to get them to invest in this plan he has to make electricity, basically wireless electricity, so that you don't need batteries. It's just anything that needs power, it'll be able to pull it out of the air. And of course, no investor asked this question, but if I'd have been an investor, my first thing I would have asked is, how are we going to make our money back on this?
Right.
We're basically making, you're going to make electricity free and you can just pull it out of the air. how do you monetize that? 'Cause you can't.
Right.
You can't monetize that.
So you can't make your investment back.
Yeah, you can't make the money back. He's just thinking, if I can get enough money, I can do this. And it would have been awesome. You know, the thought that, you know, you don't have to, anything that needs power, it'll just pull it out of the air. That's awesome.
And that's why synergy is so important between, you know, these kinds of minds. And then you have to have compassionate people to make you remember about your workers,
right?
To remember about your clients. Don't forget that they are humans.
Yeah.
So
well, there's a great book. I won't get into a whole lot of detail about it, but it's called The Six Hats, and they say that in any business you have to have. They consider these like 6 different colored hats. It's like whenever you have a business, you have to have you know, these different people willing to wear these different hats. You know, you have to have the person who's willing to take an idea and like tear it completely apart, you know, and say, well, this won't work because of this and this and this. And you need to have the conscience, and you need to have the creative person, you know, you need to have the practical person, you know, and all these different mindsets to make a business run. And, creativity alone isn't enough, but it, you know, again, very much like I would say, as someone who is very interested in Eastern philosophy as I am, I think that this episode is a really strong indicator of what happens when you go too far from one side or the other.
Definitely.
You know, I think Edison, in a real sense, you know, he may have went too far on the business side of things, and where, you know, Tesla was too much on the creative side. And, you know, if the two of them could work together in a fair way,
right?
You know, but that was the problem, because Edison was way too business minded, even though he was a scientist. Because he was way too business minded, you know, he was never going to get a chance. He was never going to give Tesla a fair shake. You know, that whole line about the digging the ditch, you know, in the show. And so, but like I said, I found that I may be reading more into the episode than was actually there, but the fact that they made it a little ambiguous, and they didn't have a strong demarcation of where, at least to my mind, that Tesla was the good guy and Edison was completely the bad guy. I mean, obviously the show leaned a little more to Tesla. So
they didn't have that big come to Jesus speech at the end of the show like they did with Orphan 58
or 55, yeah,
Orphan 55, yeah.
Yeah, that's true, they didn't. And which and of course we talked about that last week, and why that scene at the end didn't quite work for me as a writer. But
you don't want the big glowing neon sign that says, here's the moral, blink blink blink, here's the moral, blink blink blink.
Let me tell you how you feel about it. You know, that it's like this, you know, it's the job of the story to make you feel a certain way, but you have to get there. They can't tell you, okay, cry now, go ahead and cry. It's like, that doesn't work. So, but yeah, I think this story worked definitely a bit better. And of course, next week we're going to be getting the Jadoon, so we're getting another. It's kind of weird to say an old Doctor Who character, because this is New Who. So,
but they are about 10 years old, so.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's because that's how long this has been going on. We haven't seen the Jadoon since David Tennant. I mean, I think it was The Stolen Earth was the last time we really saw the Jadoon.
Yep.
So it's great to kind of see them come back. Of course, whenever they show up, it's not a good thing.
Nope.
You know,
it's usually with a shadow proclamation. So
yeah, so they're definitely looking for somebody, and the fact that whoever they're looking for, that the Doctor's stuck in the middle of this. I have to say that the trailers, what I love about the trailer for that episode is it doesn't tell you an awful lot. It just gives you enough to make you interested, but it doesn't wreck the plot for you like some teasers will do. So, and it seems like, especially with the trailer that we saw today for the second half of the season, that this is probably going to be a descent into some darkness. And we're going to start to see more of that. So definitely next week we'll have a lot to talk about when we see that episode. And so with that said, we come to the end of episode 97. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.